Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli, live in Australia. Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am well. How about you?
I've still got a bit of a cough, so if I go into coughing, then just mute me and keep talking until I get over it. But I'm okay. I can talk. So apart from my cough, I'm feeling all right.
Wonderful, wonderful. You what would you like to talk about today? You sent me an email, and we can start where you would like, or I can rattle off some things that have frosted me. What would you like to do?
Okay. What I would like to do is I would like to discuss, first of all, the issue. This is going to be probably one of the shows where your ratings go through the floor again, because I'm going to discuss a controversial issue. I'm going to discuss the issue of abortion. Okay? And I think I sent an email to you about that.
Yes, you did.
As very, very, very sad that there's been an article has come to the surface, or scientific research, and it really didn't surprise me. I knew this anyway, and it's basically that when a baby is in the womb, it is capable of feeling pain. And, it's really, really very sad. If people knew what happened in an abortion, that little child is actually ripped limb from limb. Okay? I have to say this because, it's so sad that the skull is crushed, the child's ripped limb from limb. If you did that or I did that, I'm not advocating doing this, but if you did that or if I did that to a puppy, for instance, we would go to jail for a very, very long time. We would deserve to, and we probably wouldn't ever get out of jail because somebody would find out what we'd done and would probably give us our just desserts. If we did that even to a dog or a puppy. This is not a dog and it's not a puppy, it's a human being. Okay? And it's no research, no surprise whatsoever that what this research says is that babies from a very, very young age are capable of feeling pain. They do feel pain. It's a terrible death. And if anybody out there has had an abortion, you need to know that God does love you and God does forgive you. Your little baby is in heaven, okay? Your little baby has been looked after by Mother Mary, okay? And when my husband Archie, when he was, when he was on this earth, okay, he had a car accident, he died, and he went to heaven, and then he came back to the earth and lived for probably another couple of decades after that. One thing he saw when he was up in heaven, he saw Jesus, and he saw Mother Mary, okay? and he saw that Mother Mary was put in charge of all the babies who had been aborted and who had miscarried and all the children who had died at a young age, and that she is the best mother that you could possibly imagine. She's absolutely beautiful. And Archie said he absolutely loved Mother Mary. He thought that she was the nicest, sweetest, kindest lady that he had ever seen. And if you had an abortion, you need to know that your baby is being looked after by Mother Mary herself. And your baby forgives you, and your baby is waiting for you to turn around and tell Jesus, you know, I'm sorry, can you forgive me, please? And if you do that, then you'll go to heaven one day when you're old and grey and you end your life like we all end our lives one day, because none of us is immortal. And then you'll end up seeing your baby in heaven, because your baby is in heaven, okay? I think that that's all I can say there, Vincent. But I saw that article and I was just absolutely heartbroken. I have two sons. My two sons are so precious to me. They're just about everything in my whole life. You know, I don't have, you know, my Archie is in heaven now. He's not going to come back. He's going to come back when Jesus comes back to the earth. But aside from that, you know, my two boys are about all I've got. You know, I've got my farm, but ultimately the only reason why I even have a farm is so that I've got something to pass on to my boys. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Well, it absolutely does. And my grandparents came to this country, worked hard, built something. My parents took that work ethic, built something. I took that work ethic, built something. So generation after generation after generation, we ultimately have a farm, and it's a nice farm.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that our farm, even if we sell it and move to a different one, wherever that farm is, that gets passed on. I want to make sure that the same as you. But I do have a comment about the pain and the fetus. Many years ago, I was in the hospital. Our son was born at that exact, at that time that I'm talking about. And it was, okay, we're going to circumcise your son. And I said, hold it. I've got some questions. Number one, he was just born. And I want to know, do babies feel pain? The pain of this circumcision. And literally what they do is they take a pair of scissors and they cut off the foreskin. No anesthetic, just... So where are those scissors anyway, nurse? And they just cut it off, and there's some bleeding, and they tape up the wound, and there's some screaming going on by the baby because it's feeling this pain. And I was told, yeah, they do, but it's they'll forget it. They won't remember it. They won't remember it. So the nurse was telling me this is okay because even though there's a lot of pain, the baby won't remember feeling the pain, but the baby will feel the pain. So I said, we're not going to do that. So yeah. I talked to Dr. Shealy, about circumcision, and he thinks that it's the wrong thing to do. So that's Dr. Norman Shealy's medical advice or opinion, that it's the wrong thing to do. So when you talk about the fetus feeling pain, why wouldn't the fetus feel pain?
Yeah.
How many mothers say, when they're carrying their child before birth, he's playing basketball in there, or he just stomped on my bladder, or something like that, right? How many mothers have said, something like that? So, yeah, the child feels pain. And yet, we have people who wear scrubs, uniforms, white lab coats, and they carry around mechanics tools like scissors and forceps and saws and knives. They call them scalpels. Pliers. And they use those tools on people. And yeah, I've seen a baby being pulled out with a pair of pliers. Now, it's a kind of a special pair of pliers. They grab the baby by the head and they pull the baby out. But yeah, and then sometimes babies come out cone-shaped because of the pliers that are used. Have you seen that, Guineith?
Well, when my son Theo was born, they pulled him out with a suction cup, and somebody, when they put the suction cup on his head, they actually put it directly on top of a fontanelle, and it created a bruise on the top of his fontanelle. And nobody thought what consequences that might have for the baby. And I pointed that out, and I said, "You put a bruise on his fontanelle. The brain is directly underneath the baby's soft spot, the fontanelle that's on top of their head." And he ended up having jaundice because of this bruise that was on his fontanelle. Oh, and by the way, I remember one thing about the gynecologist, and I'm probably never going to become pregnant now, because for one thing, there's no man, and for another thing, I'm sort of getting a bit menopausal. But if I ever did, if I had a gynecologist with blue hair, I would ask for another gynecologist.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, you mentioned a suction cup. I know for a fact, and I've seen firsthand evidence of what happens. And we're talking about a suction cup class that looks like a toilet plunger, or a sink plunger. Okay, it looks like that, and they insert it into the woman, and they put it on top of the head, and that suction cup will grab the skin on the head, and it will pull the baby outward. Well, when the babies are pulled outward, their skulls are very soft and somewhat pliable. When that happens, you'll have a bruise where that suction cup was, and your baby will probably have a egg-shaped head. I'm not exaggerating. They say it's okay. It'll return to its normal shape. The bruising will go down, and if the baby is jaundiced, we'll just put him under an ultraviolet light. We'll cover his eyes, and everything will be good. No problem. We do this all the time. Isn't that what they say, Guineith?
Well, yes, it is. Except I'll tell you what. I went to sleep, and the nurses came in. They realized that my son was jaundiced. They took him out, and they put him under the lights while I was asleep. And I heard my baby screaming at the top of his lungs. This baby is now 16 years old. And I walked up the hall, and I came into the room, and I stood next to his crib, and I said, "That's all right, Papa, my little Papa."
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Joe in Arkansas, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Hey, good morning, Vincent. Guineith?
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. I just wanted to call about the abortion thing, and if you guys get a chance to watch that movie Unplanned, it does have an effect on you. And I think it's a good thing because it is changing people's hearts and minds. And I did watch it, and I think it's saving a lot of babies.
Yeah.
Joe, where did you find the movie Unplanned so our class can find it as well?
It was in Branson and a few places in Missouri. I did see it in Harrison, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
It is making rounds, but they are downplaying it. They're saying it's propaganda, of course. So you're going to see it in your smaller towns. The cities will not carry it. They will not carry it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was banned in Austin.
It was banned where?
Austin.
Okay. Guineith sent me an article, and it says in this article, a 2005 statement from the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, it's called ACOG, claims, quote, there is no legitimate scientific information that supports the statement that a fetus experiences pain, end quote. No legitimate scientific information that supports the statement that a fetus experiences pain. That's what it says. So we're saying that the Congress, whatever that is, of obstetricians and gynecologists feel that babies don't feel pain. I'm sorry, fetuses don't feel pain. I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it. I believe they do feel pain.
I also believe, I believe it's a satanic ritual, same with organ donation. So it's the same thing. You're alive when you're taking out your organ.
Well, that's another thing. The research that I've done convinced me that an organ donor feels the pain of being sliced open in a hurry. They're being sliced open. You know, their eyes are being taken out, hearts are taken out, lungs are taken out. I mean, livers, kidneys. Let's go to town. And whenever I get my license renewed, the gal always asks me the same thing: would you like to be an organ donor? And I go, absolutely not.
No.
I'm not signing up for that. And they look at me like. And they look at me like I'm an evil person. How could I dare not share with somebody else? Why would I? Why would I put myself through that extreme torture? Why would I do that? That sounds selfish, I know. But I have come to the point here at USA Prepares after over 8 years of trying to teach people how to prepare that so few are willing to even pay attention that I'm not willing to share. I'm not. I know it sounds awful. And I know people think, who does he think he is? Well, I've worked for it. I've earned it. We've all worked, and my entire family has worked for it and earned it. And I'm just not going to give it away. Other people can work just the way we did. They can avoid the vacations. They can avoid going out to dinner the way we have. They can do it the hard way the way we have. They can earn it too. It's too hard. So I'm not willing to give away my hard work to people who are not willing to do the same thing. That's called going Galt, as in John Galt, as in Atlas Shrugged. Joe, you bring up a really, really good point. I'm so glad you called.
Yeah. If you look into it, the law was changed, and we're all organ donors now.
You can withhold your consent, surely.
You have to
That's
opt
what I've
out now. You have to opt out. And
that's what I've done.
There is a way of doing that, and if I could give you
Joe,
the name
stay with us until.
Okay.
Joe, stay with us and tell us a little bit more on the other side of the break. So, Joe, you're absolutely right. Now, in England or the United Kingdom, the law was that you'd have to opt in order to be an organ donor. You'd have to say, yeah, you can cut me up, take my parts, and I'll feel the pain, and yeah, it's all for the cause. I'm on the team, and yeah, go team, go, cut me up, slice me up, take out the parts you want. You used to have to say explicitly that, yes, you may do that. Well, in 2020, the second half of 2020, that's all about to change in the United Kingdom. And then it's assumed that you have agreed to let your body be sliced and diced and parts taken out while you're still alive unless you opt out. So the law flipped. Now my question is, who are these people? Who are these people who have said that the one thing that you absolutely own, which is your body, you're alive, but you're not capable of saying, don't do this. These people have changed it, so they said that they can take our body parts. Who are they? And I think that the fitting reward for those people is, I think that they would enjoy being tied to a stake with a campfire lit below them, so they could feel some of the kind of pain that they want to subject us to. I think we ought to try that out and say, okay, so you guys want to slice and dice us and make us feel pain when we're not capable of doing anything about it. Well, that's kind of like us tying you to a stake and putting a little campfire below you, and so you can see that what the pain might feel like, and maybe you might change your mind. But until you all feel that pain, you're not doing it. Any comments, Joe?
Yeah, it sounds like practice what you preach law.
That's a Rich Scheben-ism, right?
Yeah. Could I give you the name of the website where people could learn how to opt out?
Please do.
It's called lifeguardianfoundation.org. And you will see there's a doctor there who's been screaming for 40 years that brain death is a creation, that he believes there's no such thing, and that it is being used to take people's organs. And that when somebody, a bad accident or something comes into the hospital has a facilitator there that is ready to greet the family and to advise them what would be best, and that would be to donate their family members' organs without giving the family a chance to come together and talk about it. So they're kind of fast-tracking so that the people don't have time. They're in trauma. They don't have time to think about what's going on, and they hastily give in and donate that person's organ.
Donate that person's organ, which really means put them on the operating table without anesthetic and cut them up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Joe, what you said, I believe what you said was, if I remember correctly, that brain death is a creation. Is that what you said?
According to this doctor on this website, and he's been screaming about it for 40 years, it's all about getting people's organs because it's big business.
Well, I absolutely believe that. I believe it is big business, and I didn't approach this subject that way, but you know what? I think you're right that it is a creation. It's a euphemism. But the brain is not dead. It can't be dead, because if the brain were dead, the body would stop breathing. The heart would stop. The circulatory system would stop. Everything would stop.
That's right.
So I believe, Joe, I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said that it's a creation.
We have many experiences with people have come back. People have come back.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my Archie came back. My Archie came back. He was in a car accident. He was his body was utterly crushed, and as he was coming back to his body, he went to heaven. He was clinically dead for 9 minutes, as they say. He was crushed in the bottom of an automobile, and as he went to heaven, he saw God, he saw Jesus, and he saw all the people who had died in heaven, especially the little babies, and he saw Mother Mary there, looking after all the little babies. And as he was coming back to his body, he heard the ambulance officer say to the fireman with the jaws of life, he says, "Oh, don't be too careful with that one, he's gone."
Don't be too careful.
Within moments of him hearing that, he was back in his body, and the ambulance officer, you know, they cut his body out of the wreck of the car, and he got up and walked away from the accident.
Oh.
And
Don't
the
be too
ambulance
careful.
officer just about jumped out of his skin.
Don't be too careful with that one?
Don't be too careful with that one. He's gone. Archie said that as he was coming back to consciousness in his body, he heard the ambulance officer saying that to the fireman with the jaws of life. Don't be too careful with that one. He's gone. And then as soon as they'd cut him out, he got up and walked away from the accident.
Wow.
Class, that's what I object to. I object to the callousness, the carelessness, the frivolousness that people exhibit toward others. It's an outrage. It's an absolute
especially
outrage.
The dead, the living as well. But you know something? I'll tell you a story.
Hold
when
it, Gwen.
When I was at the University of Melbourne, I've always loved anatomy. In my past life, I was a surgeon. I was George Wilson, the lover of Bartholomew Roberts, but he was a surgeon. And I've retained that love of science and anatomy especially. And I would have been an anatomist and probably would have gone on to be a surgeon, except when I was at the University of Melbourne, I had the chance to study anatomy, and the reason why I didn't study anatomy was I found out that the anatomy students, when they were dissecting the corpses, they would get parts of the corpse and they would throw them at each other. And I was so disgusted by that I determined I was not going to study anatomy. I would have no part in it.
And they do that. They do that in biology. They do that in high school biology class. They do, and when they dissect animals, they do that in college. You're absolutely right. And Guineith, when you said don't be too careful with that one, let's just extrapolate that out. Don't be too careful with that one. She's old. A living person. A living person. That's an outrage.
The whole attitude.
Let me digress just for a minute. There's something that I witnessed in my life, and it stays with me every day. Joe, I'd like to hear your comment on this, Joe, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was visiting a relative of mine, and I was outside in the front lawn, and her grandmother was in the dying process. She was going to die soon. Maybe today, kind of a thing. Maybe in an hour. Maybe the next minute. Very, very soon. And her husband was outside standing with me, and I thought he was an okay guy until this happened. And he looked up at that bedroom window where the grandmother and my relative was. And he said, "Die, woman, die, die." He couldn't wait for Grandma to die.
Isn't that
and
sad?
He was wishing it. And I haven't talked to that man since, nor do I want to. But I don't think he's the only person that's like that. I think there are sick people everywhere. It's wrong. It's a sin. It's outrageous. It's disgusting. Those are just a few of my thoughts. Joe, what do you think about that? Have you seen anything like that in your life?
Yeah, it's horrible. That's what I think. And, we have our enemies, but I have no want to kill anybody. And when I hear people wanting to kill a certain group of people, it affects my inside. It turns me. It just totally rubs me the wrong way, and I don't want anything to do with that person anymore.
Mrs. Finelli, if there's a spider that's walking around in the house and she finds a spider, she'll catch it and bring it outside because she doesn't want to step on it or kill it. I mean, that's kind of, we think life is precious. All life is precious.
Well, you want to hear a weird one? I have plastic containers in my bedroom and in my bathroom to catch things so that I can take them outside and let them go.
Well, that's well, Joe, I find it fascinating. Have you ever called here before? Because I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, you have. All right. What makes you interested in USA Prepares?
Well, because I'm learning and I'm able to get out what I feel and what I want to tell and let other people know, because I really believe that movie Unplanned is such a good thing that it is saving people's lives. And if people just look up that movie, unplanned.org, I've already heard that, young kids are going and seeing that, and they're coming out of that, and they're totally changed. They're not going to have it.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's having a positive effect, and that's what we need to do in these days.
Okay, and that website is Unplanned?
Unplanned, I'm pretty sure it's unplanned.org, but if you do a search, you will find it, and you'll find out. You'll be able to do a search on their website and find out where it's playing in your area.
Okay. I'm looking for it right now. And
I'd like to throw out a theory I have on the organ donation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've actually talked to Dr. Shealy about this. The helicopters. Everything has a premise of being something good. And I'm not saying anything about the people, the pilots or the nurses or the paramedics, but I believe the helicopters have something to do with Lifeguard and Foundation, because all the hospitals have them. And I'm a volunteer fireman, and when we have calls, the helicopters are out here before we can get a fire truck there.
Mm-hmm. So I believe they're fast-tracking people. If they have a bad accident, they're fast-tracking people that should. Joe, the website that we're looking for is called unplannedfilm.com. UNPLANNED film, FILM.com. That'll take you to the website that you're talking about. So we can share that with our class. Joe, I really appreciate you bringing this up. There's so many things wrong with society today. Me first. And me first, I mean, a great example of me first is abortion, isn't it?
And I appreciate you giving me all this time.
No, it's our pleasure. Thanks so much, Joe.
Okay. Have a great day.
You too. Very sad topic, Guineith.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you brought it up. And you know what? You mentioned
I'll tell you something else, because here in Victoria, we have, abortions at 9 months. So basically, they're murdering newborn babies here in Victoria, in Australia. And if any, if God struck this whole state with massive bushfires and lightning tomorrow, I really wouldn't blame him. Because the way that the law is here at the moment in Victoria, if an obstetrician or a gynecologist refuses to perform an abortion, he can lose his medical license. Isn't that disgusting? That's completely
whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath? Whatever happened to
completely unconscionable?
Whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm?
Yeah, that somehow doesn't apply here, And I feel so. It's sort of like we've got one of the highest levels of foster care of children in the whole of Australia. Here in Victoria, they can basically take your children on a whim, and you've got to fight tooth and nail. And a little while back, the former head of child protection in Tasmania said that after 20 years of being in the child protection industry, and it's a mill. It's really a sausage mill. You know, like that movie The Wall, where they shove the children in the top of the meat mincer, and then they come out as sausages out the bottom in the video of the Pink Floyd clip The Wall. You know, that's
Yes.
what the whole
Yes.
system is like. It's just disgusting. It's absolutely sickening. And the former head of child protection in Tasmania said that he didn't know a single, even one, good outcome of a child that had been through the state care system. You know, in 20 years of being in the child protection area and having thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of children come across his path, he said he didn't know of even one of those children that had had a good outcome in their life. They were all drug addicts. They were all criminals. Many of them had suicided or overdosed or were mentally ill. None of them had a good outcome. We are treating our children like rubbish, and it has to stop. It really has to stop. It just makes me so sad every time I think about it, you know. And we're treating, in our society, not you and I individually, Vincent, but our society treats all of life as being so cheap, and it's got to stop. We're destroying ourselves. As a society, we're self-destructing. And if we don't stop, then, you know, we're standing square in the way of God's judgment. You know, we would have brought it on, as a society, we would have brought it on ourselves. It's got to stop. We've got to start caring for each other, you know, but at the same time, we've got to be requiring each other to actually stand on our own 2 feet. If that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Vincent?
It absolutely does, and you're talking about child protective services, and what comes to my mind is something that I've been saying for a very long time, and that is, if you flunk out of life, you can always get a job with the government, and if that doesn't work, you can always sell insurance. Now, I kind of mean it. And who works for the government? A bunch of people that just can't work in and they can't work in the private sector.
Racket for the purposes of supplying a steady stream of children to pedophiles. That's what it is.
Yeah. And you know what, Guineith? People who are listening to us for the first time think, "No, those guys are crazy." No, the government's good.
True.
No, they're here to help us and protect us. Well, give it a few more years. Give it a few more years, and they'll figure it out that what we've been saying all along is correct. It's not like we started out this way, class. Guineith, I, and the rest of the instructors, we all learned this the hard way. We'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. So, class, if you like the idea of not being subjected to pain, you want to make, and you live in the United States, you might want to make sure that when you renew your license, that it says on there that you are not an organ donor, because if you are, and if you are harvested, sliced and diced, you'll be sliced and diced without anesthetic. You will be awake, and you will be alive, and you will feel the pain. And there's nothing you can do about it. So, word to the wise.
Yep.
Guineith, what's next?
Okay, just before we get on to the next topic, I just want to shame Mark Zuckerberg for a while, just for a few minutes. I'm sure you won't object. when I shared that, I actually shared that abortion article that I mentioned earlier on my Facebook page. If my Facebook page is still there, that is, after having shared that article, because after I shared that article, I was actually banned by Facebook from sharing any content on my Facebook page or any posts by any other, Facebook people that I knew. And that included a particular painting which was by a man by the name of N.C. Wyeth, which was about, it was about a fellow by the name of Richard Sedley, who was a fictitious character, the main character in a book called The Black Arrow by Robert Louis Stevenson, and his lover, John Matcham, who is actually a woman who's disguised as a man, and I shared that particular drawing or painting because it relates to the George Wilson and Bartholomew Roberts situation, where George Wilson was a female disguised as a man for the sake of her own safety. And I thought that it was very interesting that Robert Louis Stevenson used the same plot device in one of his novels. And I actually complained to Facebook. I said, "How dare you? This is so offensive. That you are banning me sharing this picture of this transvestite woman disguised as a man." And I had a lot of fun doing so because their hypocrisy is just blindingly ridiculous, But I know now that the reason why they banned me from sharing it was because I'd posted this article about abortion and about babies that are being aborted feel pain. Well, hey, I just object to little babies being ripped limb from limb, that's all.
Yeah. Yes, I agree, and I think Mark Zuckerberg has infected.
He's lost the plot.
He's
clearly lost
infected the. He's infected the planet. He is like the. He is the most determined peeping Tom on the planet. He's the guy that wants to know what your children think. He wants to have pictures of your children. He wants to have pictures of you. I was talking with Rich Shealy this morning. He called before the broadcast. And I made the statement that I think that young people are screaming out for attention. They are lonely. They are lacking attention. They're saying, "Look at me, please. Look at me, please." They're crying out because they're lonely. They have adopted technology. I mentioned that Marty Barrett, one of our instructors, teaches biology. She has about 70 students in her class. And it's a long class. It's at the college level. And they take a break, a restroom break during the class. And she says the minute that the students are on break, the first thing they do is go to their cell phone.
Yeah.
They don't turn to the person next to them, to the left or the right. They pick up that stupid phone. And that kind of shows you where we are. She mentioned that she has a friend who is a little older than she is, and every once in a while they go to lunch together. And she said this on the air. They went to lunch together, and they sit at the table at the restaurant, and the friend brings out the cell phone. So I just got to check a few things for work. Just got to check a few things for work. Really? That's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's absolute nonsense.
Why not just wait half an hour and just have a cup of tea and a lunch with somebody?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So I won't do it. I won't do it. Class, you may not believe this or not, but I can go all the way to the post office and back, and I've been doing it for years without having a cell phone. I can go all the way to the big city and back without having a cell phone. But what I do is I will tell our family, I'll say, okay, Mrs. Finelli and I are going
and what
to...
time you're expected back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here's how we're going. Here's the route we're going to take. Here's the roads we're going to take on the way there. We're going to make this stop first, second this stop, third this stop, fourth this stop, and then we're going to come back on this path, and we should be back by 7 p.m. or whatever the hour is. So you don't have to start worrying until like 7:30. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what we do. And because we know how long. Yes.
That's been the policy at our place forever. That was when I was a little girl, when I was a teenager growing up. That was what my mum insisted. That she said, listen, your dad and I, we need to know where you are. We need to know when you're going to be back. It's not because we're interfering, but it's just if something goes wrong, we have to know where to look for you. And I would go out fishing sometimes as a 14, 15, 16-year-old in various rivers. But I would say, oh, Mum, I'm going fishing tomorrow morning. And she'd say, that's fine. What river are you going to? What stream are you going to? And I'd say, oh, I'm going to this stream mouth, or I'm going up to this bend in this river. And she'd say, yeah, fine, that's good. Okay, we'll have fun. And we'll see you back tomorrow afternoon, shall we? And I'd go, yep, that's good. And I would ride my bicycle in the dark to that fishing location, but it was okay because they knew where I was, and they knew what time I would be back. But if I hadn't shown up, they would have raised alarm bells.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's something that Mrs. Finelli and I have done. We have several children, and there's a curfew at our house, and it doesn't matter. We have our boys here. One is over 30. One is in his upper 20s, and they've never been married. They've had girlfriends, and doesn't always work out. And so I'm delighted to have them home. But as long as we've had children, there has been a curfew. And I've explained to our children, I don't care what your friend's curfew is, or what time their parents do or don't want them home. My rule is 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, because nothing good happens after midnight. And the other thing is, it's not fair for Mom and Dad to have to stay up late wondering if you're okay, and being a parent. It's not fair. So the rule is 11 o'clock. That's it. That's it. Now, you don't have to live here. If you choose to live someplace else, okay, I understand. But as long as I'm in charge, 11 o'clock is the curfew, because it's not fair. And they understand. They understand It's not fair to keep Mom and Dad up.
And it's for their own safety.
Right.
And if they have to be somewhere where they caught out overnight somewhere, which happens sometimes, then they give you a call on the telephone. They say, listen, it's like this. I ran out of fuel. It was silly, but I did. And I booked a motel for the night. This is the name of the motel. Whatever. Or, that's it. But as long as you know that they are safe, and, they'll probably feel like an idiot for, whatever it is that happened, because probably it was avoidable in hindsight. But, sometimes things just happen. You get mechanical breakdowns, and, they can't get a tow truck driver because it's late or whatever, or the tow truck driver's sick, or, I don't know. Any one of a million things could happen. But this is it. As long as people know that there's people on this earth who care about you, and as long as they know where you are and when you're likely to be back. And then if you're not, then they know to, maybe come looking for you. And this is it. And with my son, if I go out for a horse ride, I say, listen, this is where I'm going. This is the route that I plan to take. And this is what time I'm expected back. This is what time I'm expecting to be back. But, if I'm delayed, then, you know that we can be delayed sometimes. But, this is the route that I'm taking. And do you know something? Sometimes I have been delayed because, maybe the horse gets tired and he decides he's going to go into limp mode. I mean, not literally limp, but he's decided that he's going to walk. I had a horse like that once. He would go at a good pace, and then when he decided that he'd had enough, he'd start walking. And it didn't matter how much you spurred him on, he wouldn't go beyond a walk. And my son knew about his horse.
Your horse sounds like USA Your horse sounds like USA Prepares instructor material. Doesn't take direction very well.
Yeah, he died a while back. He got his leg caught in a fence, and we had to put him down. But he was a very nice horse. He was very reliable, and I really liked him. But when he decided that he'd had enough, he would walk home. And but my son knew this horse. He knew that that's what this horse was like. He'd done it many, many, many times before. But, he wouldn't worry because he knew the route that I was taking. And sometimes I would see him riding up the road along the route in the opposite direction. And he would see me walking along with the horse. And he'd say, he's decided to walk home, hasn't he? And I'd say, yeah, he's decided to walk home.
So, Guineith, you sent me a link to an article, and the headline is, and this is from The Age, it says, quote, hundreds evacuated from a central business district apartment building after a water leak. Goes on to say hundreds of people were unable to return to their homes after a 27-story apartment building in Melbourne's, that's Australia, central business district lost power and was evacuated on Sunday due to a water leak. Residents at the high-rise Liberty Tower located on the corner of Collins and Spencer Streets were told on Sunday night that they had to leave after the leak was discovered in the basement. Police attended the building in order to assist with the evacuation after it was declared temporarily uninhabitable by the City of Melbourne Council. The council's municipal building surveyor issued an emergency order at about 11 p.m. After the basement flooded and damaged the electrical system, the entire building suffered a power outage. Residents say that lights, heating, elevators stopped working prior to the evacuation, and contractors will try to rectify the issue over the next 2 days, with the council estimating it will likely take 3 days for the building to be declared safe to occupy due to the extent of the damage. So what happened is these people at 11 o'clock at night were thrown out of their apartments. 27 stories, everybody out.
Yeah. That's right.
Would you like share a little bit more about that, please, what your thoughts are.
Okay. Now, what's not obvious in that article, but what I can tell you from my knowledge of Melbourne, because I lived there for about 10 years, is that particular apartment building is directly opposite Melbourne's largest railway station, which is Spencer Street Station. I'm sure it's called something else now. I think it's called Southern Cross Station. But when I was there, it was Spencer Street Station, and so that particular apartment building would have been experiencing constant vibration from coming and going of both electric and diesel locomotives. It's the largest railway station in the state. And, to have an apartment building, water systems, electrical systems, and such like, and even just people living there. I couldn't imagine living next to the largest railway station in the state. Could you, Vincent?
No, and it's worse than that. Okay, a class, we have an instructor. Let me just shed a little bit of light and add an exclamation point to what Guineith is saying. One of our instructors drills wells, water wells, for a living. He's the CEO of a company that drills wells in the Springfield area. He was on the radio with me one day, and he said he was talking about this, the effect of traffic, 18-wheelers thumping down the road, this little dip in the road or this little pothole, boom, 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 all day, all night long. And what that does is it loosens the soil right around the well casing of a private well. So then the next time you have flooding, what happens is the water from the flooding goes right down the side of the well between the ground and the well casing and contaminates the well. So you're absolutely right. And people aren't thinking that these little potholes can be devastating for the area around them. And a pothole is nothing compared to a gap in a railroad track, which is thump, 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 for 100 cars long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And this particular railway station is also a freight centre. So they have a diesel, statewide diesel trains, locomotives that is, and they have interstate locomotives, and they also have suburban locomotives, which are electric locomotives. All go through this railway station, and it's also the nexus where all of the underground railway stations, okay, it's the last railway station before all the trains go underground to go through the city loop. And I wouldn't be surprised to find that Collins Street Railway, that Collins Street apartment building was built directly on top of a fault line that ran directly below the railway station.
All right, hold that thought. Hold that thought. So, Guineith, I believe you mentioned that you think that there's a fault line where this apartment building is, and right adjacent to a railroad station, and that constant thumping, the shock waves going through the ground, could be causing more problems. And I'd like to share with you another short story. So, Indiana University's main library is sinking into the ground. It's sinking about 1 inch every year because of stupidity. And what happened was the architect failed to take into consideration that the library building would have books in it. So when they added the weight of the books to the weight of the building, the excess load downward, the downward force of the weight of this building is causing the building to sink 1 inch per year. Now, that's not the only university library. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are other universities that have the same exact problem. How is that possible? Because of complacency, because of carelessness, because of greed. You put all that together, and there you have it. But I think this case was just stupidity. And concrete's really strong if it is formulated correctly. If you add too much water, concrete becomes weaker. If it's curing, and it takes about a month minimum for concrete to cure or set or harden, literally it takes a month. If the weather is too cold, the concrete doesn't cure properly. If it's too hot and the water evaporates too quickly, the concrete is not as strong. So as a as some advice to, here's what I do. You might want to read up on it before you embark on this kind of a strategy. So when we were pouring our foundation or the footing for our house, I watered it every night so that it would not dry out too quickly. Okay? That's after it's set. Okay, I didn't add water to the mix. You don't want to do that because that would make the concrete weaker. And I wet the walls many times throughout the day as they were curing so that they would be stronger. When we poured a concrete pad to park our cars on, I watered and watered and watered that concrete for about a month. Every day, I made sure that the sun didn't extract too much moisture too quickly. I wanted it to cure slowly. The more slowly it cures, the stronger it is. So it worked great. I just wanted to share that with our class. And by the way, concrete is guaranteed for one thing and one thing only, and that is it will crack. So that is the guarantee that you get with concrete. And I was thinking about this building. They could have had a lot of errors, but really not thinking about the rail tracks adjacent to it, they must have lost their minds. Seriously. At least in my opinion. Guineith, any other comments?
Okay. I just wanted to, I sent you another link there as well, which mentioned that this is not an isolated problem, that it's likely that this is a deeply systemic problem, that there was another apartment building in Sydney that was actually built in the late 1990s to be opened in 2000 to be accommodation for the Olympic athletes for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. And it's had to be evacuated. Last week, it had to be evacuated. So within 1 week, you've had two major apartment complexes that housed hundreds and hundreds of people have been evacuated. And then there's a third apartment complex that has also had to be evacuated about 6 months ago because the building quite literally began falling apart around the ears of the residents. And, you know, some of these apartments in this third apartment building were initially sold for $2 million. This was supposed to be a high-end development, and it's likely that these apartment buildings are falling apart due to shoddy workmanship. And in the articles, it actually says, well, the problem is, and I kid you not, Vincent, this is going to hit one of your hot buttons right here, okay? And I kid you not, this is actually what the article says. They said the problem is that the warranty expired on the building. Can you believe that? It had a 6-year warranty on the building, and because the warranty expired, the building is now falling apart.
Actually, I can believe that, and I'll tell you why. We bought a house in Virginia. It was a farmhouse. It was built by the guy in the county that built it. It was his own residence, and it was on a really nicely manicured farm. It's a well-appointed house, and the siding was called LAP, L-A-P, siding, made by a company called Masonite. Masonite is that pegboard company. Well, after we bought the house a couple of years later, I noticed that I could put my finger through the siding. Now, it looked beautiful, but what happened is moisture would get into this pressed composite board siding, and it would disintegrate. And the skin of the paint on the outside made it look like the siding was there, but I could literally press with my finger, and it was mush behind the paint.
Oh,
and I was livid. I was absolutely livid because we had a building, an outbuilding, and our house was all made of this Masonite. So I called the factory, the corporate headquarters of Masonite, and I talked with their CEO. And I said, what gives? This stuff is falling apart. He said, you must be the only one. I said, well, actually, I'm not. The whole town is built with this substandard material, and the whole town is falling apart, and I want you to cover the cost of fixing it. And he gave me a hard time, and I said, no problem. No problem. I'll just get together with our neighbors, and we're going to sue you because it's doing it to all of us. And I said, so tell me about this. How long is this stuff supposed to last? He said, well, it's 25-year siding. Now, this is not vinyl siding. This is not aluminum siding. This is a board that is nailed in place. And I said, hold it. Do you sell this siding as temporary house siding? Is that what you guys do? 25 years? Because I can't think of anybody who would build a house and put siding on the house knowing that it will be shot in 25 years. Nobody would do that. Nobody in their right mind. That's like one generation. One generation siding. Well, they pulled it off the market. They got a class action suit. It almost took down the Masonite company.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I've seen it. It is junk siding. It looks beautiful. It really does. When it's new, it is outstanding looking. Beaded siding is what it was called. But it was absolute junk. Now, what can you replace that with? Well, there's another product which I think is pretty good. And it's made by a company called Hardy. And they have what's called Hardy Plank. Now, it is a concrete board. It looks like that Masonite siding, but it's a concrete board, and it is heavier. It is more durable, but it's hard to put on because when you go to saw the ends of that and make it, fit those boards, you will go through saw blades like crazy because you're sawing through concrete. But it's pretty cool stuff. And I used it here in Missouri, and we built a freestanding 3-car garage, and Mrs. Finelli and our boys installed the siding on that, and we used that Hardy plank, and it's great. It holds paint better. It's better than wood. It's better than wood siding because wood siding expands, contracts, and the paint falls off it. But the Hardy plank, it doesn't. So the paint adheres to it. It's way, way, way better, but way harder to put on. So and it's hard to nail. So literally, what we did.
Yep. That hardy plank stuff. Okay, I have to put a caveat in here. Years and years and years ago, they don't do this anymore, but years ago, it was actually made with asbestos. If you get old hardy plank, that's a real concern. But these days, instead of using asbestos fiber, they use fiberglass fiber to bond with the concrete to actually hold it all together. If you are drilling through that, you have to make sure that you have a P2 mask, because if you inhale fiberglass fibers, they can be almost as damaging to your lungs as what asbestos fibers can be. And this is something that is being way underreported in the building industry. If you are fixing hardy plank panels to the side of your house, you must wear a P2 filter when you are doing your drilling. Okay. And
that's what we did. That's exactly what we did. We made sure we'd set up the table saw so that the radial arm saw in a position where the wind would blow the dust away from us. We all wore eye protection. We wore respirators, and it's not easy to install that stuff. As a matter of fact, you have to drill holes.
Last.
Yes, and we screwed it onto the garage. Literally drilled the holes, the blind holes, and we went through, 30, 40 drill bits. I'm talking about top-of-the-line drill bits, because they'd only last for, maybe 3 or 4 boards, and the drill bits would be dull. It's that hard to do. It really is. So keep that in mind, class, and Guineith is absolutely right. It's dangerous to do it. The dust is dangerous, and it's not just the dust of that. If you are working with pressure-treated lumber, which used to be dipped in an arsenic solution, that greenish solution, the dust, the wood dust containing arsenic is poisonous.
It also has copper and chromium in it too. It's copper, chromium,
CCA.
arsenate. Yeah,
that's exactly right. It's another material that's used. So if you are handling any of those materials, pressure-treated boards, you must wear protective gloves. You must, if you cut it, wear protective respiratory devices. And you must wear eye protection to protect that from getting into your eyes, on your skin, and you got to wash off early and often. We'll be right back. Head off onto a tangent, but I think it's important, class, that you know about this. That pressure-treated lumber that's kind of a greenish color typically contains chemicals that if insects try to eat it or microorganisms try to consume the wood, they get one bite and die. And some of that wood is called CCA, treated wood. And it's prohibited to be manufactured for most implementations. So it's chromated copper arsenate. So it's got chromium, copper, and arsenic in it. And it's illegal to use that in the United States except for a few purposes. It can be used for agricultural purposes or construction that would be for permanent wood foundations. Now, agriculture, here's what's done, and you're not going to believe this. Fence posts, that's one thing.
Cattle yards.
Cattle yards. Yeah. Vineyards. Yes, vineyards. So what happens is farmers who are planting a vineyard may use these pressure-treated CCA posts in the vineyard, and right next to the post is where they plant the grapevines. So the copper, the chromium, and the arsenic leach out of the posts into the ground and is taken up by the vines, the roots of the vines, and you get to drink it in your wine, or your grape juice, or your jelly, or your jam. That's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and can you burn it? No.
No.
You shouldn't burn pressure. So if you've got all these little pieces that...
The smoke is poisonous. You'll kill yourself if you burn it.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do with it?
Or actually...
Well, so the recommendation is, well, you throw it away. Into the landfill. Into the landfill. So you can't burn it. You don't want to put it around your garden. You don't want to make a raised bed out of it because the arsenic can leach into your soil, and then you get to eat it, right? So it's a real problem. So when you think about things like, why is it that greenish-colored wood does not decay? Why? Well, because it's poisonous.
That's why. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind, and don't burn it. Don't put it in your fireplace. And the only acceptable disposal location is the landfill. That's the only disposable location that is viable because you can't do anything else with it. So if you need a 6-foot piece of wood and it comes in 8-foot lengths, you've got 2 feet that you've got to get rid of.
Oh boy.
Into the landfill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of those chemicals that was used in all of that wood is on the ground or in the ground right now.
Yeah.
All of it.
I'll tell you what, Vincent, if people want to have a more environmentally friendly way of treating timber so that the termites and the fungus and the rot and the bacteria don't get into it, what they can do is what people used to do back in the day before CCA-treated timber was invented, is that they used to paint the wood with sump oil. Stops the termites dead in their track. There's used motor oil.
Used motor oil, yes. Yeah.
That's
what we
here
do.
In Australia, they call it sump oil because that's where it comes out of. It comes out of a sump, okay? Meaning the plug in the bottom of your oil system on your vehicle. That's called, in Australia, it's called a sump plug, okay? And people used to paint whatever timber that was going to be in contact with the ground. They used to paint it with used motor oil. And they used to save their used motor oil, and they used to keep it in jerry cans and such like in their sheds, you know, with painted on the outside used sump oil. And they used to keep it for that very purpose. And it worked fine. And there's many old fences, fence posts, you know, housing, framing timbers, foundation timbers, house stumps and such like, in old houses in Australia that are there for 100 years that were put in there with used motor oil in the first place, and the termites have never eaten them.
We had a mailbox post. It was made out of cedar. And termites generally don't like cedar, but ants were climbing up this 4x4 post. And so I painted it with used motor oil. I mean, we live on a farm. Hardly anybody goes down this road anyway. I didn't pour gallons of it. I just painted it on the wood, and that stopped those little buggers from making their home on the post. So yeah, it absolutely works. And what about creosote? Mixing creosote with sump oil?
Yeah, creosote works fine as well.
Yeah, that's that tarry, gooey stuff that you have in your wood stoves. Yeah, mix that with the motor oil. Mix that with the used motor oil. Hey, Guineith, your breadth of knowledge is astounding.